Today I want to delve into a topic that's rarely have I ever heard it discussed online or in person in the Opal world that's specific to Opal doublets and all of the complicated stuff that surrounds them. If you stick with me to the end of the video, I'll also share one of my personal business experiments about Opal doublets that if you use this knowledge in your own doublet making, you could significantly increase your return on investment in your doublet making by simply making one cheap, affordable decision. If you're just getting into opal cutting or an intermediate cutter, you're eventually going to get to the point where at the end of your parcels, you're going to have thin slices of opal and you're going to need to make the decision on whether or not you're going to make doublets out of those slices. There are two strong and opposing viewpoints on doublets in the opal world. Some embrace them and some dismiss them, and is often the case online. The critics have the louder voice, and that's why it's really important, especially as new cutters or people that are new to this topic, that you look at both sides of this argument critically so you can make your own decision on the topic. I think both sides bring valid arguments to the table, and I think understanding those sides is critical in making informed decisions. On the anti-doublet side, you often find miners and cutters that deal with high-end opal. If opal industry is a pyramid, these are the guys way up on the top. You know, and for them, opal doublets can be a frustration, and I understand that. A lot of times they're in shows or on the street, and people come up to them and say, "Oh, look at my ring. Is this a great solid opal?" And unfortunately, a lot of the times, or at least from the stories that they tell, they have to say, no, well, that's an opal doublet. And they've got an opportunity to educate there, but they say that's a frustration. And I can certainly understand that. For these people, sometimes opal doublets are seen as deceptive and can ultimately hurt the opal industry or the image of the opal industry, which is a valid concern. In every industry, top-tier players build credibility by promoting the great aspects of their own product and educating people on all of the other things that are in the industry, and that's how they build credibility for their own brands and how they promote their own products. But there's also a second tier below there, and I've seen this in every industry that I've ever worked in, that will belittle their competition, that are mudslingers, that talk bad about any product that's not their own product, and they think they do that is a way to sell their own products and build their own credibility. But in reality, I think that does a lot more harm to their own brand and the credibility of what we all work every day to sell and promote, and that's the beautiful Australian opal. You see this kind of thing in dodgy used car sale lots and stuff like that. And I think that we can all agree that we don't need any more of that kind of promotion in our lives. And we don't need it in the opal industry. We should, if you don't like opal doublets or something like that, well then promote your own product. Belittling other parts of the industry in order to promote your own thin slice of it is really myopic. And as you get into opal cutting and you make your own decisions about that, keep that in mind as a way to support the entire industry. At the heart of the anti-doublet argument isn't really doublets, it's people that are trying to pass doublets off as solids. And if you look at the people that are criticizing these guys the loudest, although they're right in their criticisms that this is unethical behavior and it shouldn't be done, these guys are often promoting the highest grade, most expensive opals, and I think that their approach can be sometimes misguided, but you're going to hear it. Like if you're out in the opal world, you'll hear this approach, and a lot of people just take it for what it is and say, oh, well, doublets are horrible, without looking further into it. Now let's look at the other side of the equation, the doublet supporters. They put forward some really important points. One is affordability, right? So there are a lot of people that can't afford solid opals, and by offering a cost-effective, more accessible option, it opens the door to an entire new market that we can grow the love of opals from. If this is opal as a pyramid, you think about this as the foundation. You can have millions and millions of people who can afford an opal doublet, and that's a great entry point into the opal market that expands the base that eventually will feed into the top of that pyramid. Maximizing material. So Part of being an opal cutter is just not letting anything go to waste. And while there are other ways to deal with thin pieces like inlay and stuff like that, making doublets is the most common way to deal with them. And that's a way to not be wasteful with your opal material. It's hard won. It's good to use every piece, like nose to tail your opal. Number 3 is expanding the market. They're affordable, they're beautiful, and the reality is that opal doublets bring more people into the world of opal, and many of those people will go on and buy upgraded solid opals in the future whenever they can afford it, as their love for the Australian opal grows. If you look at the arguments and try to weigh them out, on one hand you have the expansion of the opal world, the expansion of the opal market, the building of the foundation of that pyramid in favor of doublets, and on the other side you have a small amount of unscrupulous characters that that try to pass doublets off. For me personally, I think it's more important to build a foundation to expand the opal market. I think we need balance in the opal industry, and that balance is healthy. At the top of the pyramid, I think that we need people that focus on only the very finest solid opals. And I think that we need, that foundation of the opal pyramid, of the opal industry, that promotes everything opal, whether it's expensive opal or cheap opal or opal doublets or opal triplets, everything that can push opal out to the world at large is going to help share our own love of opals with the world and help filter everybody up to the top of that pyramid. That balance is really important, and it's a dynamic that's seen all over the world in all kinds of different places. I mean, you've got the Pope and the rest of us sinners. You've got Jimmy Choo's and Payless or Lamborghinis and the Isuzu. Everywhere you go, you see entire industries built on this same model, and it's no different for the opal industry. I think it's really important. The only thing I have a beef with is that second section in there where we try to tear each other down to promote our own, little bitty slice of the opal industry. There's no reason to do that. If you have a slice of the opal industry that you really like, promote it, educate it. Don't tear everybody else down. That doesn't help you. That doesn't help the brand. It just makes you look like an asshat. Like, don't do that. Don't be that guy. Nobody needs that. I don't like that. You don't like that. They don't like that. The people don't like that. I've got a question that I don't know the answer to. And I'm going to take you guys through my process. And this is the exact same process that I used in gaining all of the other specific knowledge that are needed in order to take my game from being a good proficient opal cutter to that next level. My question is this: as long as there's been people that have been cutting opal, there have been people making doublets. Because the reality with cutting opal is that it's inevitable that you end up with pieces that are too thin to make solids. And that opal is really hard won, and you don't want to waste it. And so the next best thing is either make doublets or inlay with that material. And the thing that I don't know about doublet making is if a particular kind of doublet backing is preferable. Now, Australian opal cutters use 3 main things for their doublets backing. One is industrial black glass. One is potch, black potch or dark potch from Lightning Ridge. And one of them is this, which is boulder opal or ironstone from Queensland. All 3 of these things are used in making the backings of doublets. What I don't know is if one of them can fetch a better price than the others. Now, I know that there are different attributes to them that make them appropriate for different kinds of settings. For example, if you're just going to make a free hanging stone off of a necklace, boulder is almost always the best choice because it presents really well if it's not set. Using industrial black glass is almost always the best in terms of speed for pieces that are going to be set in bezel cups where you're not going to see the backing, and you want material that doesn't have any flaws in it. You want to make them fast, and you want to make a lot of them, right? Because it's really consistent. The thickness is always the same, and it's really fast to process this stuff. A lot of people like Black Potch from Lightning Ridge because it's, it's made out of the same material that the Opal is made out of. It's a natural stone. Black Potch is essentially Opal with no color in it, so it's a really good option because it has the same thermal expansion rate that Opal does, and so even if you use a really hard epoxy, you don't have the Opal slice expanding at different rates than the Opal backing, which, is probably all good things. So what I don't know, though, is whether one of these options is better in terms of my return on investment. Now, if you cut enough Opal, it's almost like it's almost like if you play enough cards. There's knowing how to play the cards, and then there's having that specific knowledge that lets you understand how to play the cards in specific situations to get specific results. And the only way that you can get that knowledge is to play those hands, is to cut those opals again and again and again and again. Or in this particular case, you can set up testing, like A/B testing, like you would do in advertising, or ABC testing. And so what I'm going to do today is I'm going to take some slices that I have of opal that are identical slices, and I'm going to set up an ABC test where I make 3 opal doublets that are as identical as I can make them, only with the backing being different. And I'm going to put them all up on auction and see which of the backings is preferred. And hopefully, like I said, I don't know the answer to this, but going through this process is the only way that I can know for sure what the answer to that question is. I could ask and everybody would have their opinion. There's been a lot of people out there right now that are saying all kinds of things about opal doublets. They're saying that they shouldn't be made, and they're saying that there should be illegal and stuff like that. Don't listen to any of that. Making opal doublets is a part of being an opal cutter, and if you want to be an opal cutter, and you want to be able to buy parcels and use every bit of those parcels so that you can make a little bit of profit and continue to do this, then it's really important that you learn how to make opal doublets. There's not a lot of people out there that are showing both sides of this equation. A lot of people, have serious opinions about things like that, and that's fine. Everybody's got their own opinion, but it's important for you to know, if you want to be an opal cutter, that this is a part of the process. Just like a butcher makes sausages, you need to be able to use everything that you have and not waste anything, and doublets are just a part of that. I'm going to make 3 doublets as identical as I can with different backings. I'm going to put them up in no reserve auctions so that I don't set the prices, so that buyers out there can look at them and everybody can bid on them. It's going to be the same auction time. We'll do 7 days. We'll see which one of them gets the best result. Maybe they're all exactly the same. Maybe everybody who says, oh, this one is better than that one, maybe they don't know what they're talking about. But the reality is that nobody that I know can answer that question. Pre-auction polling was tipping that Potch was going to win at 52%, Queensland Ironstone at 29%, and Industrial Black Glass coming in very last at 9%. For the Lightning Ridge Black Potch came in at $186. The Boulder-backed opal came in at $211. And the Black Potch came in at $161. So you can see there, by just changing the material and the backing of the opal, you can get a full 30% increase on the amount that you get paid for that opal at fair market value. These were really well visited auctions. I got about 500 people to visit them and had 70 active bids on most of them. And it's gaining that specific knowledge that leads to my decisions in my shop, my decisions in my opal cutting. And if you want to take that next step and you're an intermediate cutter, you know how to make doublets, and you want to up your game a bit, well, then you can take the knowledge that you've taken from watching this video and the lessons that I've learned in going through these steps, and not only learn from my lesson, but you can also take the structure that I use for your own lessons. Whenever you have a question and you say, oh, I don't know whether it makes sense to cut the thing in half or to sell it with a crack in it. Like, I know, because I've done both, and it's always cut the thing in half.